Welcome to self-discoverywisdom.com, formerly known as Self-Discovery Media. On these podcasts, you're going to hear people who speak from the heart. They've taken the journey in life. Many things have happened to them, but they've changed it to happening for them. And in their strength, their courage, they've discovered their abilities and their wisdom, and they are now sharing it here with you. Do enjoy each show. We bring it to you with love and knowing that it's going to help you on your journey of life. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Welcome back to another edition of Ignite Your Heart and Soul right here on selfdiscoverywisdom.com. I'm your host, Sarah Troy. My guest today is Michael Karassowitsch. I'm sure I'm pronouncing that wrong. But Karassowitsch, thank you. We're going to be talking about the architect at two vast realms, the architect in practice as being as the world and spirituality. He's sharing his approach to making environments built, planned, intentional, that support human aspiration and springs from the essence of that aspiration to fulfill human life for the individual as each of our components of the role of being human fails here on Earth. There's no separation between the integration of human intelligence, nature's intelligence, the intertwined life of anyone, humanity or planet and beyond. The riches that we find in are greater than any can be deposited in any bank. Finding that and making ourselves available, able to value that and whole in the light of two sides, our inner work, which is currently called spirituality, and our outer space, which is called architecture. These are the two original siblings that derive from human consciousness. He's sharing this because architecture is the public sphere. On the one hand, to practice it above all other people, so to be communicated. On the other, driven forward long and hard to develop a point where you can function at a level that is true according to what you knew intuitively and a way that you can serve. Taking this into one's life has started with small steps as we're already on the path. How do we make it real? He would like people to better utilize the potential in making their life space more supportive to their health, aspiration, and in light of this, and not to do it alone. He was born in the Greater Vancouver area, the Canadian, and studied at BCIT and University of Oregon, Columbia, etc. And he's had a vast experience and very academic in the way that he approaches things, but that always find that academic and spirituality is just looking at things deeply from a different side of the coin and kind of almost the infinity of something of the instead of just being in spirit and constantly in the flow of the ether is kind of understanding what is the foundation of it and how do they merge and grow stronger with each other, the two sides. So welcome to the show, Michael.
Hi, I'm glad to be here.
So it's you're definitely a person that's part philosophy, and part the intellectual of study and the two together. But people don't actually understand, kind of the architecture you're talking about is the architecture of the human psyche, the human body, the human need. And then this the spiritual, which is trusting of the intuition and the wisdom of the universe, and how to blend it together in a way that it actually does not only build your own essence, but builds a better community. Am I on the right track or am I not?
Yeah, I think that it sounds all encompassing, and that's
Mhm.
part of it. But I would simplify. I like to try to simplify it, even though it sounds academic sometimes. But one way to look at it is that if you're an aware person, you might start to question yourself. This is a classic question of who am I? Why am I here? What is my purpose? Right? And we're able to look at ourselves, we're able to observe ourselves and see who we are to some degree, right?
Yes, that's
That's
what life's
our,
about.
so architecture really ends up being the external version of that.
Hmm.
So, if you can ask who you are and what you are, you can also ask, where am I? Why am I here? Is it better over there? You
Hmm.
go over there. And when you're over there, you might say, does this really fit me the best way it could? What could I do about this? And then you put a stone up, or you put a flag up, you put a gate, you put up a door, you plant some plants, you move a tree, And so the relationship between spirituality and architecture is that if you ask those questions of yourself and then you embark on a path of growth and evolution using those things that we have got from our antecedents, all the people that came before us, they're
Hmm.
leaving us their tracks and their traces and their methodologies. On the outside world, it's the same thing. We're building on what we've already learned. So on the inside, we're a blend of nature and our consciousness because our bodies and our lives are harmonizing and intertwined with nature. On the outside, we are acting in nature, and one has to accept that, or assume, or
Hmm.
accept, whichever you choose, that um, there's a reason for our consciousness on the planet. There's a reason that we are here. And
Hmm.
so when we act in the planet, and there is not just what we do for ourselves, but there is what we do for each other. And then there is doing that in a way that approaches what nature has us here to do. And if
Hmm.
you look at technology the way we have it right now, there's a kind of a, a separation from nature.
Yeah.
It's something we might get into later on here. But if you have to look around that to understand kind of the point of view that I'm coming from in architecture, is that architecture actually isn't about technology. Architecture is much more about nature than technology.
Hmm.
And it serves us.
Mm.
It serves the purpose of what you might ask about yourself. Like,
Yeah,
why am I here? Who am I? And then to do something about that, you know? And it's not
precisely.
just making your psychology better. It's about evolving your very consciousness.
Exactly. Exactly. And the thing I think what we happen to do as human beings is separate ourselves from nature. We're just another creature of nature. We've separated ourselves as human or animal. Uh, Animals could look at us just as another species of animal, and we're all part of nature. And when we work with nature and allow nature to actually nurture us in the way that it does, then we actually have a lot more respect for the land in which we're on, for the frequency in which we travel in, and also for each other, all living species. And I think if we could get out of the separation that I'm human, so I'm more superior. No, you just have more abilities on certain levels than the animal kingdom or earth kingdom. But I think the immersement of we are nature, we are part of the one, we're part of the collective. We're not here to abuse it. It's not here to serve us. We're here to serve each other. And the journey of life is that wonderment of who am I, why am I, what am I here to do, and who am I here to do it for? And I think if we can take that journey and understand we're part of that nature, then we'll actually understand our meaningful purpose. And when we step into that, then we could be more productive.
Yeah. That's a lot to answer to just right there in one sentence. But, basically, I think that I mean, I don't really know exactly if I'm focusing on architecture or technology, or I mean, or
Oh,
spirituality here, but
it's all.
I feel that spirituality is our main goal, our main
Hmm.
purpose.
Hmm.
But in being here, we are integrated with with nature,
Hmm.
and when we act in the world, um, there shouldn't be much difference between doing what we have to do to maintain the balance of nature outside us, and doing what we need to do to balance the nature that we are.
Hmm.
But I think that you can discuss very much the difference between animals and humans. Obviously, there's a difference.
Yeah.
So one set of things to do is to try and define that difference, right? But let's just let that be. It is what it is. And I focus on working with what I can actually access and work on, which is myself. So I would like to have the supposition that my uh, impulse toward developing my consciousness, my evolution, and if I don't have that, taking a step back, the capacity that I have and the capability that I have to address what I do, who I am, where I go, all those things, all the capacity which can be transformed into powers, I have those available and I can do a lot. And we're seeing how humanity can actually
Mhm. Mhm.
turn nature into a knot. You know, we can
Yes.
make all the things we want. But I do believe, and I would guess that, Sarah, that you would also believe that we haven't seen the results of our actions yet. That nature's time, space, and nature's way of working to try and find a balance is only now beginning to happen because it operates on a scale, a time scale, and on a mass scale, like gigaton scale,
Yes.
that none of us actually can even comprehend. I
Mm.
like to say, like, if you're in a city, you can say, oh, this city has 2 million people in it. But can you even imagine seeing more than 1,000 people?
Yeah. Yes.
We can't see a
No.
million people. We can't perceive a million people. We can't perceive 10 gigatons of carbon or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
So we're working with abstractions, and
Mm.
that's what we're good at, right? But I like to say nature can see it.
Yes.
Nature can see 10
And feel it.
gigatons and feel it.
Mm.
And so we're working with nature, and nature is working with us as a human body, all of us together. Like a ant hive is a body of ants. It's a body, and we haven't seen its balancing reaction yet. But each of us can feel it in our bodies. We can
Mm-hmm.
balance our bodies, and we can work with that balance in our bodies, and that is part of what we're here to do. But the other part is this impulse to improve. So I
Mm-hmm.
use the word aspiration.
Mm-hmm.
In a lot of the way I would define architecture, since I guess that's our subject here, spirituality and architecture,
Mm-hmm.
the way I define architecture is that when we're in a certain place, um, we are, our perception picks up our own inward aspiration as the environment we're in.
Mm-hmm.
So the environment is formed in such a way that we feel something.
Yes.
And that's something in that environment which ties to our aspiration is what we call architecture.
Mm-hmm.
So I am not using architecture in the terms that you would use it sort of colloquially, where you say, the architecture of my paper is 6 chapters and each chapter has 5 sections. Not like that.
Mm-hmm.
Architecture, I'm pushing it to another level where I'm saying architecture is that characteristic that represents our evolutionary impulse in the environment. That evolutionary impulse that we have inside us is what we bring to the environment. So architecture does not happen in a forest.
Mm-hmm.
We see architecture reflected in a forest, and we see it in the rocks or in the crystals that we might see on a cliff or in the shapes of a mountain. We see that. So we find it happening there, but it's our perception. Like the dog will not notice the shape of the Matterhorn the way we do,
Right.
or a crystal, or anything, or a car.
Mm-hmm.
The car has a meaning to us because of uh, and this is the amazing thing that we all together understand this thing, even though we're not able to communicate it in words. That the shapes of architecture, like for example, the pyramids.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, those people lived 5,000 years ago, and they were of a culture, if you're from North America or from China or wherever, that was different.
Yes.
Even if it was today, it would be different. And we step up, and they're just simple geometric shapes. I mean, there's
Mm-hmm.
almost nothing there, but it's the scale and the arrangement relative to everything on the planet. And suddenly we say architecture,
Mm-hmm.
and nobody's going to deny it. As simple as they are, as plain as they are. So it's something that is human,
Mm-hmm.
that is being done in the environment, and it represents our aspiration. So going back to what you mentioned about, the consciousness that we have inside us, which relates to animals, um, it's possible that a, a whole bunch of dogs together could build something by gathering sticks together and put it together in a
Mm-hmm.
pile. It might look like rubbish to us
Mm,
because it doesn't have that connection, that meaning. Like maybe it's the saliva on the sticks that makes all the difference.
right.
You don't know because it's not us. But leaving that aside, we have enough work to do just figuring out how we act in the environment and the fact that we know when it represents us better and we know when it doesn't. We feel it in our hearts.
Yes.
And that feeling in our hearts about if something is right or wrong is very undeveloped at present.
Mm-hmm.
But it is developed because right now we are looking at technology. Like you want to see that things have a certain technological refinement, if only it's like the wrapper to your chocolate bar opens in a certain way, or has a certain feel to it. Those things affect us a lot. Like it'll be either more appetizing or less appetizing. All of
Mm-hmm.
those technological requirements reflect across the world, and it's really important for us to understand that technology and use it right now.
Right.
But the problem is that the way we are thinking technology is extraordinarily disjunct or separated from how nature works.
Mm-hmm.
So that's something I could get into later. I don't want to pile it all on this one comment, but the relationship of how we use technology, how technology works with nature, is very much a colonizing idea. We colonize each other. We have
Mm-hmm.
colonized our cultures. Well, we have been colonizing nature for much longer. It's part of our attitude toward our material world is that we feel that because we have so much power, because we can think, and because we've gotten pretty far along in our systems thinking,
Mm-hmm.
that that power gives us certain rights.
Mm-hmm.
And well, we see right now in the politics, we see all
Yes.
that's in the last 100 years, politics, when people get a certain amount of power, they seem to associate that with a right.
Yeah.
And that disconnect is happening in nature for every single person that every day.
Yeah.
When we eat our food, we're asserting a certain set of rights on the world. And the simplest way to express the problem of those rights is we've discarded our prayers of thankfulness.
Mm-hmm. Where's the
We've
gratitude?
discarded
Mm.
those prayers of thankfulness. And I think that those are very interesting to look at as to what we don't do now
Yeah.
in a wider way.
Just to address that, and again, a lot to unpack there, but I think when you're aware, you begin to care. And when you care, you know what action to take. And I think that, we kind of mindlessly, kind of robotically in many ways are living our lives without the attunement to the consciousness, even the consciousness of nature, the consciousness of each other's vibration and essence, the consciousness of our own. And I think that becoming aware and letting things see them as they are and kind of caring about then it invites you to take action in whatever way. Because I think it's the mindlessness. And this is how the politicians of the opulence and the greed and the narcissism and everything come into power, because if we stop being connected and we stop being aware,
Mm.
and we can point fingers as much as we like, but the reason why there's so much discord out there is because we did put blinkers on and turn a blind eye. And, if be the love you seek, be the peace you seek, you're then putting up a higher consciousness out there. And if we understand it's up to each and every one of us to be a part of that collective, part of that nature, part
Mm.
of those building blocks in our community, part of that unity, that it's each and every one of us of what we bring to the table. And the more we step into that higher consciousness of caring, kindness, and love, we cannot hurt others. To do so is to hurt ourselves. And I think that higher consciousness brings nature and gratitude and awareness and unity and a sensibility that we're kind of lacking now because we're in a lot of ways living as a humanoid and not a human being.
Right. Well, in the practice that I've done a Raja Yoga practice for quite a while, and that actually spurred me at one point because I was saying that the architecture that I'm doing, I'm following all the steps, I'm doing what we do, and they remained quite different. You know,
Hmm.
what I the purpose and I wasn't able to bring the higher level purposes into my work. So I'll turn to the spiritual aspect of it. And when you mentioned the word robotic, I can focus on that. Um, I like to say that we like to think that our computers and our IT is developing and it's becoming more functional. But I would argue that human beings are adapting to the computers faster than they're adapting to
Yeah.
us because we're made to adapt, you know. So
Hmm.
we're creating something which is enormously bulky and difficult to use, but we're changing ourselves so that we can use it better. And
Mm.
I don't agree that the computers have gotten particularly more useful and you know, now we have AI, which is supposed to take that huge step and make them ultimately more useful. But I think that I'd like to go back to robotic.
Hmm.
One of the things that shows that we're slightly different than animals is that we don't have to do the same thing all the time.
Exactly. Hmm.
I remember early on, I was reading very long time ago, before I was doing a spiritual practice, I read some stuff from Carlos Castaneda,
Hmm.
and there was you know, Don Juan was saying that they had to catch a rabbit to eat. You know, I'm vegetarian, but they were catching a rabbit to eat. So, and he said, of course, Castaneda said, as he usually does, he whines about how it's difficult and gets scared, because that was his role in that story. He was always thinking things were too difficult, and he was getting scared. So, but Don Juan then said to him, but the rabbit does the same thing every day, all the time. You just have to figure out what the rabbit does, and they're easy to catch.
Where's the pattern? Hmm.
They have no they
Yeah.
have no choice in the matter.
Hmm.
And that was that lesson, right? That a human being has the ability to either be a rabbit,
Hmm.
we can feel the rabbit, we can actually copy a rabbit's
Hmm.
habits. We could literally start eating grass and not die from it. We could just start being a rabbit, and so we also are all the animals in the world. We can
Hmm.
feel them, we can understand them, and perhaps in our hearts we can understand all the animals back through time,
Yeah.
even ones we don't have anymore, like the mastodons, which we destroyed them, the giant animals, the
Hmm.
very large animals from 10,000 years ago. They're gone because we basically killed them all. They were very effective hunters, and and those big animals take a long time to grow, and it's pretty clear now that we wiped them out in one of our earliest uh, bioengineering projects, you know, genetic engineering projects. Um,
Yes, we don't always think things through to the repercussions, right?
Even today, we are, and
Absolutely.
I don't think we ever will be able to, because we're not nature, and we will
Hmm.
never have the consciousness and intelligence of nature in us. Nature will always be more knowledgeable about that than we are, but
Yeah.
we know more about evolution than
Hmm.
nature does. I mean, you might think nature is called evolutionary process, right? But we're evolutionary in terms of our individual selves,
Hmm.
not in the broader sense. Like bodies evolve slowly because they're part of nature. We have an evolutionary impulse in ourselves, and that is not robotic.
No, no.
That evolutionary impulse is what I tie the word aspiration to.
Hmm.
And so when you talk about people being out there and all of these things that are going on, that we have to work together. Well, one of the things about working together, and one of the difficulties, if people do not work on themselves, if they do
No.
not focus on their evolutionary quality of their intelligence, our very intelligence has an evolutionary quality to it. If we don't use that, if we stick only to the natural intelligence, the intelligence of nature that is in us, then we remain kind of robotic.
Yeah.
And when people get together and try to work together, they can't,
Hmm.
because everybody's at a different stage, which is okay.
Yeah.
But if you're not conscious of it,
Yes.
if you're not conscious of being at different stages, then acceptance breaks down
Mm,
and communication systems don't develop that allow us to harmonize with so many different levels.
mm,
One of the things I learned in India, which you don't maybe pick up at first, I can reverse it onto the Canadian culture and say, in Canada, we imagine that there's one level of awareness, one level of wealth, one level of knowledge. And if you do not aspire to that, and if you don't have any accomplish in that one level, then you are looked down on.
mm,
That is a, I mean, we can talk about diversity of gender and understanding and consciousness, but I'm talking about the simplest things
hmm.
that we imagine that when you graduate from high school, everybody's reached the same level.
Yeah.
And you imagine that everybody in Canada should have a house. Those people that don't have a house, well, there's something wrong with them.
Uh-huh.
In the old days, that was very common. Now it's less because we know
Mm,
we have such a massive crisis. There are people who
mm.
have good jobs who can't get a house.
Yeah, exactly.
But in the tradition of Canada, it has been when I was growing up that if you didn't have certain accomplishments, it wasn't, it was you,
Hmm.
and that's prejudice.
Yes,
So what I saw in India is that there's prejudice everywhere, right?
of course.
I'm not saying that.
It's a human condition.
What I'm saying is that in India, the idea that what is happening to you is not necessarily your fault.
Hmm.
Or if you look at the I Ching, the
Hmm.
translation, there's certain qualities that say this is blameworthy, and there's other ones that say this is not blameworthy.
Hmm.
I thought that was a really cool concept where
Yes.
there was something that happens to you or me where you are acting out and you did something wrong, maybe wrong,
Hmm.
whatever you want to call
Yes.
it, and yet it's not blameworthy.
Hmm.
So if someone is unhoused, in some cases they screwed up,
Right.
but you can't assume that it's blameworthy.
Hmm.
But the law, the
Yeah.
law
Black and
says
white.
it's
Hmm.
blameworthy.
Hmm.
The
There's no
law does
shading.
say
No.
it's blameworthy. You
Yeah.
cannot be anywhere in this society unless you have a right which comes with having money
Yeah.
or a family or something like that. And
You're less
that
than.
that
Hmm.
makes it de facto
Yeah.
blameworthy
Hmm.
if you are without a house, for example. And you see that in California, where there's one town after another outlawing people to exist in the town if they don't have a home, which to me is insanity. It's
Absolutely.
literally insanity. I mean,
Yes.
that's like saying you can't live if you don't have any food, on top
Hmm.
of the fact that somebody's going to starve anyway, but making it illegal to be
I
starving.
know. Well,
It's
we've
like
seen circumstances of people being arrested feeding people who
it's
are
as
hungry.
crazy as
Yes.
that. Yeah,
Yes.
it's
Yeah.
as crazy as making certain kinds of eating
Yes.
or not eating, making starvation illegal.
Yeah.
I mean,
It's
this is,
ludicrous.
I know, and so that's a little bit off topic, but it does go back to the fact that how can a society be there where every single person needs to have a place to sleep and everybody needs to
Hmm.
eat, and yet those are the best ways to make a big profit because immediately
Yeah.
you have people being desperate about it.
Hmm.
Then, if we go all the way back to architecture, and then you say, in the face of all of that, how is architecture even anything more than just a decoration on buildings? Like,
Hmm.
why do we even need it? We just need structure. We need
Right.
buildings. We need lots of space. We need bedrooms. Well, I think that the best way to argue that is that that separation, making that separation is the same separation we make of us from nature.
Hmm.
That is, we're separating out the conscious impulse of being human from the natural impulse of just existing as a body.
Hmm.
So if you associate architecture is the idea of being human and nature is the structure. Nature
Yeah.
is the physical reality of being. It's different, right? They're not quite the same. It's not a very perfect simile, but when you talk about the nature of a place to be, um, there are ways to make spaces more accepting than others. And the
Mm-hmm.
simplest way is you will go into, we were just talking about the vault. You will
Yes.
go into one cafe and it will have spaces for you to be. That's one of the things about the cafe that we were talking about is
Mm-hmm.
that you can go in and you will find your table of the day.
Yeah.
And you also have your favorite table, I'm sure.
Right.
But you will find your table of the day and you will feel comfortable there.
Yeah.
And there are other cafes where you will not.
Yes.
You will not be comfortable. So you
Mm-hmm.
can reduce that to the, oh, bad design. You could say
Mm-hmm.
bad design, right? But the actual thing inside it is there is something there that is missing, which can be put there by a person.
Yes.
And then you can go to that level of interior decorator. I'm not putting down interior designers, but
Mm-hmm.
there's some people who just decorate places by choosing chairs and all of that stuff and
Mm-hmm.
put it down to like just matters of comfort and appropriateness. But it goes deeper than that.
Yeah.
It goes down to the point of like, why are cafes even there?
Mm-hmm.
And if you really think about a cafe, you can try and make it a transformative experience to go in there. You
Mm-hmm.
could design a cafe that would be so full of people all the time because they all feel so human there.
Yes.
Nobody does it.
But
Nobody.
I think it's
Nobody does that.
when
And
in the
you could.
design of it, not I think it's I mean, the people make the place, but the place is inviting the people. So if the place feels conducive to your spirit, where you feel like your vibe, you go in there and, oh, this has a good vibe, this has a
Right,
good atmosphere, and you feel that you can partake and share of your vibe and that it is harmonious, that all these vibes together. And you
right,
can go in somewhere else. And yes, it may be functional. Even the food or coffee might be fantastic, but the atmosphere isn't. You don't feel welcome. You don't feel that your signature of your vibe is matching in that environment.
right.
And I think it's
So,
that goes back to the spirit essence of what we are as to the human essence of what
well,
we
you
are.
can match something
Yeah.
simple and like the cafe and talk about something like the pyramids.
Hmm.
And you say there's something unifying and humane about pyramids. And there's the same quality, the same kind of appropriateness on that level, which is often why I go into what people call intellectual or philosophical, which it isn't really. It's just working on this higher, on this broader level, let's say, not higher, but a more inclusive level that actually has to work it with different types of detail.
Yeah.
Like if I'm working on a chair, I'm working with screws and glue, a different type of detail than if I'm working with how the chairs fit in a room, which has
Hmm.
its own kind of detail. And
Exactly.
then I can think about how that room is part of a building in a town on a street, which is another level of detail, right? So each one has detail which is very, very particular and very, very refined and fine. It's not just bigger wheels. I mean,
It.
they all have their very fine controls. So so the whole idea of this human public sphere, which has us understanding each other,
Hmm.
um, you could generate it by having certain kinds of chairs in a cafe where you're trying to attract a certain type of clientele who you happen to know has more money. So you have the Danish bent wood chairs, which gives you that kind of vibe, and then you put in the certain kind of coffee, and then you have a certain kind of lighting, and you get a certain kind of people in there, and that will guarantee that your bottom line is secure because you got
Hmm.
those wealthier people in your thing. So that's how you typically go about it. You want to have a place that attracts at least a quorum of people who have enough money to spend more than just one 12-ounce cup of drip
Yeah.
coffee. You want them to spend $30, not five.
And then they're on the computer for the next 2 or 3 hours with that one coffee and
Well,
taking up a
yeah,
table. Yeah.
right. All of those things are there,
Yeah.
right? So what I'm talking about is something which works on that level for sure. But architecture, you can see how I'm moving away from structure.
Yes.
And
Yes.
that you end up being in a position between where you don't have to be opposed to nature. That's where I would really like to get in this
Hmm.
conversation. How do you actually look at these things that are not against nature anymore and
Hmm.
even understand that it is against nature? Like I'm not a big fan of what they call biophilia because it's tending to be potted plants.
Hmm.
Not that potted plants are not connected to nature. In fact, even a Ford F-150 is connected to nature. They're all part of nature because
Hmm.
at one level,
They all came
nature
from
is
nature.
all the same structures, all the
Yes.
same things, right? So there's one person who I have been reading. She has a garden called Perelandra in Virginia. She's called Macael Wright. And she has a way of looking at it where she says everything that humanity makes is a garden.
Hmm.
Her
Hmm.
expertise is with an actual vegetable garden
You're
and
right.
flowers, right? But everything is a garden. A ship, a car, a
Hmm.
phone, a pencil, everything is a garden at that level where the material in the garden is always the same stuff that
Hmm.
nature has put there.
Hmm.
It's always the same stuff. It's a difference of whether it's growing or not. For most of us, we perceive the difference between something that's growing and something that's not growing. But if you go to the other level and you say something exists in our perceptual reality, and my life is alive in that interaction with that thing. So on the one hand, a tree is alive, and
Hmm.
that's life. But on the other hand, in another way, the pencil that you make from the tree is
Right.
also alive.
Yes.
And
I,
that
I,
is where we have to get. That's a big jump for us
right.
today. A
I know
big
it's,
jump.
um, I, I love antiques, and people go, "Well, why do you love antiques?" And I said, I love the feeling of the history in there, the
Hmm.
stories that it has to tell. I've always looked at objects as something that I connect to because I believe absolutely everything has a frequency, everything has a vibration. And I'm very much, I connect in that way. Everything came from the ground in some form or other. And I think it's when we can look at things as not just being things, but as something that is of service to you, and in our appreciation of that service, we begin to feel its signature. And I think if we can tune into those signatures, we become more appreciative
Sure.
of what things are that are being given to you. Absolutely everything we have around us has come from the earth in some form or way. And if we could appreciate the hands that went to make it, the idea that was behind it, the intention of how it would serve you, the actual
Mhm.
frequency that it has in it. I think a lot of the time we just use, and maybe abuse, and we're not understanding. Look at the origins. And if you look at the origins, the appreciation for what you have is so much more. And it changes the way you use it and the way you appreciate it. And I think we give everything then more value. I
Mhm.
think it's one of the things we've lost as a humanity is a sense of value. And we don't value each other and we don't value things. It's like, oh, it's broken, toss it out, get another one, instead of how do you repair? How do you replenish?
Yeah.
And, I think it's an analogy I'm always drawing is that I believe that we're all here to discover what our instrument is and then learn how to play that instrument, that we can be a soloist that can really be very harmonious. However, when we find that right orchestra to join, each one of us in our own strength, harmoniously playing together, can really be transcending. But that orchestra is only as good as the individual that comes with honesty, integrity, and authenticity, and a willingness to play together. It's not abstaining because there's other people in the orchestra. It's bringing the best essence and letting all those essences dance together.
Hmm. Yeah. That is the hard part,
Hmm.
coming to an agreement. I think that one of the key elements in it is uh, crazy question. Pencil that I might use is serving me.
Hmm.
Do I serve the pencil?
Hmm.
Like how do you serve um, in your work?
Appreciation.
So so uh, the the gratitude and the respect that you have for where you are is one way to turn this around.
Yeah.
One of the things that I studied when I was in India is the Indian traditional architectural practice or ideology. They have a system. People are aware of the Chinese system called Feng Shui.
Hmm. Hmm.
Well, it
Absolutely.
was predated by about 1,000 years by the Indian system, which
Hmm.
has its similarities, but they're quite different.
Hmm.
But uh, one of the first things that you do when you're developing a project in that system is to go to the place and tell that place that you are now going to come and work and change it. And you request that the creatures that are living there leave. You ask them to leave. And then in those days, because it was an agrarian society and because that was their value, they were they didn't have technology the way we do.
Hmm.
What they did to make the site um, useful is they brought cows and oxen. And after that first initial request that everything that is living there now leaves, they brought in the cows and the oxen and they let them live there until it was redolent of cows, which has a certain smell and a certain presence. And
Right.
only when that transformation to agrarian, to that kind of agriculture had transpired, did they take on the beginnings of a project, which was done through plowing and just defining where the sun path is. So they they had a ritual which included dressing up the ox and how you have to do everything in order to initiate this property before you even put a building in.
Right.
And that asking we don't have in our society
Oh
anywhere
God, no.
at all.
No, we just
And
demolish. Who cares who suffers for
well,
it, right?
we do have rituals. I mean, if you think about the ritual of a typical project we do in, say, North America, but similar in Europe, is you start out with carefully addressing whoever wants to do the building as an architect,
Hmm.
and then you start to create an idea of what has to be built. And once you have an idea of what is built, you go to the person who's in charge of allowing you to build something and you hand them some papers, and that person makes a smaller or bigger deal out of then putting a stamp on it. And then once you get all the stamps you need on the drawing, then you go to the site. And the first thing they do on the site is destroy everything that was on the site.
Yeah.
They rip it off. And it's
No
done
permission, nothing. It's
almost
gone.
with this almost with vindictive violence. It's done
Yes.
very, very
Yes.
heavily. And then after that, you put up some measurements. You put stakes in the ground and you
Hmm.
put some strings up or whatever you're going to do, depending on which level of technology you happen to
Hmm.
have access to. And then you dig a hole, either one big hole or a bunch of little holes, or you stick stuff into the ground to make your foundation. So there we have something which is almost ritualistic. And when you're in school or there's always the idea, well, you begin with the site, right?
Hmm.
So it's very materially orientated.
Yeah.
That site is your thing. But we don't actually begin with the site, and we never have. We always begin with what we need to do and what we
Hmm.
want to do. That is where the project really begins. And in our systems, there is no asking.
No.
There is no idea that you have to ask. And I think that if anything comes out of this whole out of our discussion here,
Mm-hmm.
the idea that you don't need to ask relates back to how you treat yourself.
Hmm.
I have been involved in my meditation practice for a very long time, and I have talked to a lot of people about doing a spiritual practice. And the fundamental issue is that, on the one hand, people have not taken up the authority over themselves to do anything about it, and they're very afraid to do so.
Yeah.
And they will deny, deny, deny.
Hmm.
But at the same time, they are very wary of taking up any practice. As and I say to them, well, if you don't have any value for it, and if you're not interested in developing yourself spiritually, why are you so sensitive to being trapped in a
Hmm.
cult or being persuaded to do something which is not right for you or something like that? Why is there such a fight against that?
Hmm.
And then I would just relate that back to the idea that we don't know how to ask nature.
Hmm.
We don't have community with nature, and that includes ourselves.
Hmm.
because we are a unity of nature and whatever the human idea of living is, our evolutionary purpose is. We're here on the planet in a combination with nature, in a
Yes, we
harmony
are.
with nature to do something. And we're very, very, very afraid to ask that question.
Yeah.
Most of us. I would
I
have
think
to
it,
say, unfortunately, most of us are afraid
most
to ask the
most people,
question,
absolutely. And
why
it's
am I doing anything in my life at all? Is a question that some people come up with, but they quickly revert to saying, let's have another beer.
yeah.
And it's over, right? It comes very quickly in the
Yeah.
discussion.
And it's back to the fear of it, but it's also, I think, I kind of put it down to the life expectation, societal
Hmm.
expectation, the dictation of what has been. Don't rock the boat, fit in, be the same. If you are different, people are going to ostracize you. You're going to disturb things. Or will people like you? Will they approve of you? Will they value you? And so we're so busy living the exterior life, looking for that approval that we do not go to the interior life where we know we are a part of nature, we are a part of that collective, and become one of that essence and truly be who we really are.
Hmm.
Um, it requires us to participate in our own life, to step out into the middle of the road of the sunny side of the street, to do the work. That's going to take you on that journey of self discovery, to open up to the wisdom which will allow you to know what knowledge you need in what moment, but
Hmm.
it does require a complete change of perspective. It's an inner perspective, not an outer one. And when you're so much the slave to the exterior expectation, I'll only be liked, I'll only be popular, I'll only be rich, I'll only be accepted if, instead of really saying to hell with that, the harmony I seek within myself, which is at one with nature and universe, when I am at one with these, I am truly who I am meant to be, doing what I'm meant to be doing. It does require that journey. And there are a lot of people that may be afraid, maybe don't know how, or maybe I prefer to live the exterior life because then I don't really have to take accountability. I can carry on blaming society for everything that's wrong.
Yes, but given that we are in the certain time we're in, uh, um, you can see you can see that there are times where we had more flexibility to diverge and be
Mm.
divergent, and there are times where um, these opportunities are less.
Yeah.
And and so the person who diverges um, pays a different price at different times in different cultures. You know, one of the things I find interesting is when I go to India and I'm there with my brothers and sisters and doing my practice of heartfulness there.
Mm.
Um, there are a lot of people who are there who are very interested in what I do and so on, of course, because you're a drop in the bucket, so to speak, in
And
terms
every
of your
drop counts, though. Every drop
background. As
counts.
in terms of the
Hmm.
background, I mean, the numbers of people coming from outside of India are dwarfed.
Hmm.
And I said, well, imagine, what it takes for somebody like me to show up here.
Hmm.
You, even if you've traveled all the way across India, are still within the paradigm of your background and your cultural
Yeah.
history. Imagine that you yourself takes up a religion that doesn't exist at all, basically in India, and then you travel to another continent to participate with brothers and sisters there. Imagine if you've gotten in an airplane and you're eating food that you don't know about, and you're
Hmm.
eating wearing clothes that you could only get in this country, and even the climate is completely
Yeah.
different, and they kind of go, they have not thought about it, right?
Exactly.
So at the same time, for example, one of the things I did is when I was, I did my PhD only late. And I did it because I wanted to, when I asked the question, how does spirituality and architecture work together? And I also said, what do I want my career to look like? If it was an ideal condition, I could not answer those two questions.
Hmm.
Like it's one thing is to say, I'm going to do this now, and
Yeah.
then you build a house. And for me, my standard of doing a house, which is, I just did not want to decorate. anything that I did not want to do anything which is a decoration. I wanted real integrity.
Mm-hmm.
And what that integrity is, because I've seen enough of this other stuff, and it always is like, I'd love to work with you, but you're not asking the right questions.
Mm-hmm.
And you're not having the guts to ask those questions,
Right.
unfortunately, I'm sorry to say. And so it doesn't do it
Doesn't
for me.
manifest. Mm-hmm.
So you drop out and you move ahead, and the price of doing that is substantial.
Yeah.
It is a very strong downward force that you have to endure when you do anything like that.
Yeah.
And unless you're blessed, I mean, it does come down to resources. If you're
Mm-hmm.
blessed with $1 million, that's just sitting there as a whatever, you can write your book, you can do whatever you want. But ultimately, if you don't have the resources, doing something which is not normal has a heavy price.
Yeah. I
There's
could
no
that,
doubt.
um, f- f- I've been doing this 13 years and about 3,000 shows, and the amount of people I've interviewed that have been down that road of expectation. I am making the six figures. Everything I'm doing well, but I'm empty. I'm not enriched. I don't feel abundant. It doesn't matter what money I've got in the bank account. And they've literally walked away. Maybe they had a nudge, nudge, wink, wink, or maybe they had the cosmic two by four, but something made them walk away from that and go on that inner spiritual journey. Where now if they've taken the structural knowledge of what they had before, the abilities they've had before, and they've put it to something that is
Mhm,
more meaningful, that is more spiritual. And they
mhm.
feel they have less in the bank, but they feel so much more enriched and abundant in
Yeah,
heart, soul, and spirit, and meaningful purpose. And yes, it does take guts to do that. But I do believe we all sign a contract before we get here to do what we're meant to do. And part of our journey in life is gathering the skills, gathering the knowledge, learning what the wisdom is, to then step into what we're here to do.
mm,
And it's been aware and taking that journey.
mhm.
And some people get a few cosmic two by fours before they are on that right path. But eventually, that path is there. And resistance is futile if you allow to go through it. But there are
Yeah.
some people that will block it out and go, no, 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 no. But it is listen to your heart and soul, listen to the inner core. It never lies to you, it will always guide you right. And if you trust it and follow it, it will really lead you down paths that are sublime.
I think that if there's a lot of people who have, I do, well, I do believe there are accidents
Hmm.
in the world. I mean, there's say 8 billion of us careening around the planet. There are going to be accidents.
Yes.
And I think that one of the things that I heard a lot of times when I started my spiritual practice is listen to your
Yeah.
heart knows, and so on. And I mean, there's no question that that's true. There's no question that that is true. But understanding when it is your heart you're hearing, if you've endured a lot of accidents, which I think you might be calling cosmic two by fours, but I'm
Hmm.
calling them accidents
Hmm.
of fate, accidents that of other people's lives crashing into yours in ways that were not intended, even by your program that you came
Right.
into life. If that program was so fixed, there would be no point in coming into life in the first place.
Exactly. Exactly.
So I think that there are a lot of people, and to some degree, I'm speaking from experience, that when they hear that talk of listening to the heart, it can be very, very frustrating because um, it's exactly the heart that got tangled up. And untangling the heart is something that is, on the one hand, a delicate operation, and on the other hand, very easy, because you don't have to know anything about the solution. All you have to do is
Mm.
want it.
Exactly.
But
Exactly.
that is where the problem lies in today's ultimate issue. I think we've come to a level of consciousness after, say, 2000 years since the last big transformation, starting with Buddha, going through Christ, and so on. Since that last big transformation 2000 years ago, we've come to the position now of facing a new thing where it is the actual will and your own awareness
Hmm.
that becomes the enemy. And so you could the enemy within type of thing,
Mm-hmm.
but in a very, very powerful way where um, there are forces in the world who that actually actively try to turn you against yourself
Yeah.
so that you come out of the box, so to speak, out of being raised, where you are unable to find that datum, where you are unable
Mm-hmm.
to locate your your actual personal compass,
Mm-hmm.
not because of a lack of knowledge,
Mm-hmm.
not because of a lack of experience, but because there has been an active training to turn you away from it.
Exactly.
And that training has to do with who you think you are.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you want to, um, I could give an example. When you want to use your experience, you cannot.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's I like that starting to go that way because I see people get real nervous when I start talking about this.
Yes. Yes.
They get really nervous because that means you have to question your own
Mm-hmm.
values
Mm-hmm.
back down to, who you are. And if you can't stand up to that questioning, then you're not going to be able to, well, obviously you're not a master of yourself yet, but getting to that mastery, the first step is to be able to say, I can't do that, but I want to.
Exactly.
And and then when somebody comes and spouts, you listen to the heart, listen to the heart, it will always be right. And if somebody has that difficulty, it's devastating.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have to be real careful if we want to bring along people who actually really do need the help.
Yeah.
And by saying that, you actually exclude them right off the bat.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that is for me, that's a very, very interesting proposition because in spiritual practice, there's a transformation where you first of all you become compassionate, and then you
Yeah.
learn to love, and then you learn to love all, and then you become love. And the
Mm-hmm.
latter one, who accomplishes that? Very few people.
Mm-hmm.
Because at this time, but it's possible for many, many people to do it. But to
Absolutely.
become that,
Yes.
to actually become that, is those people can stand for helping anybody.
Exactly.
And we don't at the society we have right now, we don't really respect those people.
Mm-hmm.
We're not willing to let someone lead because the first thought that most of us have, and I've had the thought is, why the hell should that person be in charge?
Mm-hmm.
Why is that person in charge and not me?
Mm-hmm.
So many people think that they want to be in charge. They want to be leading. They want to be guiding. They don't even, and then the other kind is that I don't want to be the leader, but I want
Mm-hmm.
to say how it goes.
Yeah.
I don't want to be in charge, but I want to tell everyone how they have to act. These things are all coming up, right? So the key thing to finding our way through this time has to do with that finding how to locate your aspiration, which is what you were talking about,
Right.
finding out what your aspiration is.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, we have to face that we're working from a position both where the entire value of humanity is
Mm-hmm.
about to change,
Exactly.
and at the same time, we're in a position where there are so many people who are in a devastated condition. It's really easy to say, just like the rich man will say, or woman will say, I don't understand where the problem is. I mean, you just earned some money and you're good, right?
Mm-hmm.
And and it's the same thing. Just look in your heart. Just look in your heart and the answers are all there. And
You
that,
don't recognize the heart truth, though, unless you're willing to take the journey. And I think a great deal of it is, are you willing to explore? I think one of the things we've kind of lost out a lot in life is that wondrous, that expectation. We've become so fearful of the unknown instead of wondrous of the unknown. And I think
why
we
would you
have,
be
well,
fearful of the unknown though? What would be the
well, I
thing?
think, I think we've been conditioned to be fearful.
Are
You know,
we? Well,
I think,
what if you're actually on your uh work? I'm not what some people are conditioned to be fearful, that's for sure. No
yeah,
question. I agree with you. But if you look at the practical aspect of it and say, what kind of things are you uh what kind of practical things would you lose? What kind of practical things are you afraid of
Hmm.
actually not having or suffering? The practical things in our societies, and I would go back to like your home
Roof over your head, food in your stomach,
or
security.
your health
Yeah.
in the USA.
Yeah.
What is it?
Yes.
The biggest source of bankruptcy in the
Hmm.
USA is medical problems.
Right.
And so you want to toe the line because
You're
those
fearful of
fears
of
that
that.
you were
Yes.
trained
Yes.
to have
Yeah.
actually have practical
Yeah. They have
entities that can happen to
validation.
you.
They
Yeah,
have
they have
validation.
validation.
But kind of, I call it the kind of the common sense fear.
Mm,
Where we have that fear of, what is the risk? And you don't want to risk everything and just take a leap. But what you do want to do is go, well, in order for this fear not to cripple me or encompass me and stop me from moving forward, is what steps can I take? What doors can I open?
mm,
Where can I be inquisitive? What
mm,
can I listen to? What can I read? What conversations can I have that will open up more doors, more possibilities that become less fearful and that perhaps can even make what I need more secure? But I think we've lost that sense of exploration, of asking questions, of communication, of even feeling a little wondrous about life. And this particular show is called Ignite Your Heart and Soul. And for me, that soul very much, a lot of people concentrate on the heart. For me, it's very much about the soul, because that's that divine wisdom that resonates with the soul and truth, that's given to the spirit and action for the mind to have the clarity it needs when it needs it. And you're
mm.
not going to have that trust of that wisdom, of that soul knowledge, of that desire for the intellect to know what it needs when it knows in clarity, unless and a certain amount of you is willing to surrender and kind of blind, deaf, and dumb in order to see, hear, and feel. We have to be willing to be uncomfortable and explore some things. And if security is really important for you, do it within those parameters, right?
Well, I
But it
think
doesn't
that
mean you can't explore.
I guess on the one side, and I'm not going to go much further on that, but I think the idea to be willing to be uncomfortable when you're uncomfortable all the time seems a little bit ridiculous.
Where there's different levels of comfort. And
Mm.
if you're wanting just the security and the status quo, and this is how I'll
No,
accept life.
if you want to survive, if you want to live and just have enough to survive, then allowing yourself to be uncomfortable doesn't come into the picture because you're
You
just
probably
not
don't even
surviving.
realize you're uncomfortable because you're
No,
just
you
living
don't.
on the
And
survival. Yeah.
that's where I was thinking of also. I know
Mhm.
people when I was like 19 and 20 who were starting out in their careers and they were bonkers. I mean, they just did everything and threw themselves in and bankruptcy,
Mhm.
whatever, they were not worried. And in my own life also. And I did it in my way and I realized that I was in a lot of ways unable to feel the risk.
Mhm.
I was not because I was already in a place that was so gone into risk from, not physiologically, but in my core, I
Mhm.
was already feeling such risk that I couldn't see what I was doing. And
Right.
and I didn't see what I did to other people either. Like
Mhm.
I've worked for some architects who were really brutally exploitative
Mhm.
and sure, I got benefits because I said I worked for that guy. I worked for
Mhm.
that guy. I've worked for some relatively famous architects. I've done what they do, and they put their name on it, right? It isn't
Mhm.
like I just swept the floor. I actually did stuff that counts, and I could have been one of them.
Mhm.
And there was something in me which said,
You can't cross
if
that line.
I'm using 10 or 15 or 20 people's good capacity and goodwill and capacity, and calling it my own.
Yeah.
And that's
No
fine.
credits.
That's fine if you can, I mean, you can build something like that. There's one architect who's taken that in hand. His name's Renzo Piano. He has actually said that it's a collaborative. He still
Hmm.
gets the name, and he
Yes.
got famous originally a long time ago. He got famous so long ago, but he's still working at 92 or something like that
Hmm.
now, and he works that way where he has a lot of power because of young people and meet,
Hmm.
all the people around him. It's a collaborative power. Um,
Well, it's like a movie, right? A movie isn't the stars or just the director. You sit and watch the credits at the end of the movie. There's thousands of names there, and
yeah,
without
it's
them,
true.
there would be no movie. And the thing
Okay.
is that people may understand you're under the umbrella of that brand, that name. But if that name doesn't give respect to the people who have contributed,
Right.
right? Then it's a little narcissistic because it's all me, me, me. But when
Right.
the person recognizes and acknowledges the contributions of others, then the others are more willing to keep contributing.
Okay. Take it a step further and say that a movie has, say, okay, the movies they now, if you take a big one, it's got 500 people, right? But
Hmm.
say take a smaller movie that has, say, 40 or 50 people working on it. Okay. Say that that movie has, out of the 50 people, 15 of them are fully qualified directors
Hmm.
and basically doing what directors do. 15 of them. And the movie would never have been the movie it is without
Hmm.
all those 15 people being directors. Um, our way of looking at a project doesn't really accommodate for that
Right.
kind of broad contribution of
Hmm.
people who are actually, um, you know, horizontally at the
Yeah.
same level. It's a very horizontal structure. And there are, for example, going back to the Indian system, they recognize four different architects, four different, uh, types of architect, whereby you need all four types to do a project. Now, one person can be all four types,
Hmm.
but there are four types of architecture involved. And I mean, just as an example, there's one is called the Takshaka, who's the architect of creating the building, physical skills. There's the other one who knows all of the rules and all of the
Yes.
history and all of the systems. And there's another one who is about creating the documentation and figuring out exactly what thing is going to be in this particular building. But you can see how the person who's building it and the person who knows all the
Yeah.
rules, they're all doing the same thing. And the
Yes.
fourth one is called the Acharya, the one who actually says, he's the one who does the sketch on the napkin,
Hmm.
right? And so there's these four types. Even for me, it's hard to not think of the one who has the sketch on the napkin as
Hmm.
being the main man or woman, the head honcho,
Hmm.
right? Because I respect that, but
It's
in
the innovation.
when we're teaching, well, innovation can happen at all levels, right?
Yes, but I mean, if somebody doesn't have an idea of what to build, then the others don't have the idea of how to build it or how to
Yeah, and it's
contribute to it. So there's always
true.
somebody with the vision.
It's interesting that you focus on that because we actually don't teach those people in school. We don't create those architects.
Mm-mm.
And the profession of architecture does not really recognize them because we don't pay them.
Right.
There's no way to earn the money for that position. The only money you earn is based on the quantity and value of the materials and systems that you put into a building. That is how architects get paid.
Mm.
By the value and quantity of the systems. It's a proportion of the value of those that architects are allowed professionally, legally. I mean, of course, there's a huge bandwidth of agreements and discussions and so on. But in principle, you're not paid to be an innovator. You're not
Mm.
paid to be the guy who has the big idea. You're
Right.
certainly not paid to serve,
Mm.
although that is what we're selling ourselves as.
Hmm.
That is what architects in a lot of professions say they are doing. but they get paid by the mechanical, physical production that has no adjustment for its qualities beyond the simple one that, well, I've been in a magazine and you haven't, so I charge
Right.
more, right?
Right.
That's the one we can charge for. And that has its sort of like market value that knock on,
Mm-hmm.
ultimately, the guy's probably better. It's probably better. But generally, we don't structure in those values.
Mm-hmm.
And again, that ties all the way back to the way we are technologically and materially orientated right now,
Mm-hmm.
which
Mm-hmm.
is a long-term development that came from the over the past 2,500 years,
Mm-hmm.
where we've reached this point where the better we make things, the more efficient we make things, the more powerful we make things, the more likely we're to be destroying it
Mm-hmm.
the closer we are. So, for example, you want to engineer now chickens and cows that produce more meat for less food, for less input, right?
Right.
And then the ideal would be to be growing meat without an animal.
Mm-hmm.
Ultimately, you don't have any animal anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Ultimately, it's gone.
Yeah.
And that can't possibly be how we feel most fulfilled in our as a human. And and it's not even going to be the average human who gets the benefits from that. That all of these benefits since the Jetsons cartoons came out
Mm-hmm.
does not go to the Jetsons.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The Jetsons don't get those benefits
Mm-hmm.
of more leisure time.
Right.
None of us get the benefits of this. So again, the more efficient things become, the more smart they become, the less we have of our society, which is the sign that this whole structure of technology is coming to an end. I
Mm.
mean, I don't want to be a doomsayer because actually we're ending our doom right now by coming to the end of this.
Right.
And the weirdest thing is that architecture has always been, although we invented, like engineering as we know it was invented by architects, color theory invented
Mm-hmm.
by architects. Almost everything that you know in terms of the environment we have
Mm-hmm.
was invented by architects. And now it's all specialties. And we
Right.
most call half of them engineers and other ones
Mm-hmm.
consultants and so on and so on. But and architects have remained like doing what they do at the center of it all, and we remain in a position where the average architect cannot define architecture at all.
Right.
They can't. They just
Yeah.
start talking and they say my building,
Mm-hmm.
and then they hope people like it, and then they get to do more buildings.
Right.
But the definition of architecture has stayed in the middle undefined as it sheds more and more functions that we produce the world with and that other people do.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's an analogy for how we actually handle ourselves. Like we are skilled, we're doing all these things, we have money, we have our family, we have our house, but we don't pay attention to ourselves.
No.
We don't know how
Right.
to do
So,
that. And
and that's
so,
that's what we need to do. That's what we need to
yeah,
do. That is, I kind of consider the next chapter of humanity. I feel that um, as human beings, we're behind on our evolution, and that we really should have risen to a higher consciousness way before now. And these burdens of things and expectations are holding us back rather than evolving. What you say is, you say, kind of doomsday things coming to an end. To close out the show before we quickly talk about your book, um, what would you see is at least chapter one in this next phase of life?
well, I think the chapter one for every individual person is to have the fortitude to take up a spiritual practice and
Hmm.
do something that works for you. And there would be a whole discussion about the difference between religion, because a lot of people are religious and all of that.
Yes.
But basically, is to begin to experiment with your own awareness and your consciousness,
Hmm.
which the method for that and the actually I would call it the human skill for that, which has been there for many thousands of years, is meditation.
Hmm.
That has been the first way to get discipline And once, as you're getting the discipline, you look into yourself to see what's there and you begin to work with it. So you have to find the stillness and you have to take the time to look at that. And you have to be very careful because just as what you eat, you
Hmm.
become, what you meditate on, you become. So you have
Yes,
to be very
exactly.
careful. And I agree with people who are very sensitive about what they take up.
Hmm.
I recommend heartfulness. You can't go
Yes.
wrong. You cannot go wrong with it. And begin. So
Hmm.
on that level, I say that's what we have to do.
Right.
The second one, I've actually dealt with that recently since I came back, is to develop community that thinks about, that works on this thing a little bit differently than we have been.
Hmm.
So if I'm talking about, say, a small town like where I live, and they're doing an OCP, like a community plan, and thinking about how can you get more people in the room, and
Hmm.
how can that those people being in the room begin to function better.
Yes.
But then you confront the problem like, well, who's actually in charge? The mayor doesn't show up and he doesn't know anything anyway, and he doesn't care about that stuff. The building planner, the town planner, is not made for that. He's basically a bureaucrat. Counselors aren't allowed to because they have to make decisions based on what they did, so they don't want to be involved too much because then they
Hmm.
become conflict of interest. There's no leadership possible.
Mm.
It's actually not possible. So, as an example, I'm just giving an example. I'm not trying to go down that rabbit hole, but if you're developing community, then you have to confront the idea of leadership. And when you confront the idea of leadership, then you have to confront how you're leading yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
And
Yes.
that is the second step. So, if we want to talk about architecture as being the sibling or the twin sibling of spirituality
Hmm.
in terms of our developing how we work with our environments, we need more architects and more architecture. And that means even amongst architects, the kind of community we're developing has to work on this problem that we're not paid
Hmm.
to provide architecture.
Hmm.
We're paid only to provide buildings like a contractor or a builder.
Right.
We don't actually get to directly assess our value in our
Mm.
society as a remuneration to help us work. It's
Hmm.
a side effect. And that's
Yeah.
how this thing was. We're not supposed to be competitive. We're not supposed to
Right.
fight against each other. We're supposed to just take the fee as it's structured, and the quality of our work is what we provide because we have enough.
Right.
I'm paid well enough so I can
Yeah.
work as hard as I can at creating a good product. Well, that whole thing is gone
Hmm.
because we don't get paid enough. We haven't
Mm.
gotten paid enough for a long time. You cannot pay for a 5-year degree in architecture with your business.
Mm.
It's the very, very few people can do it. And because anyway, we're not going down that rabbit hole either. But the first thing we can do is that community that allows us to create the terms for a new discussion.
Yes.
It's not a magical answer,
No.
but
It's an
if any,
exploratory answer, that's the thing is that we know what doesn't work. So how do we explore collectively with our individual heart and soul and spirit in alignment
right,
and come together and have that discussion? How do we elevate?
yeah,
How do we break down, this barrier that's holding us back? And how do we do it collectively? And,
hmm
the leadership, there's always generally a spokesperson that's kind of the conductor of the orchestra, which we need that conductor of the orchestra because they're bringing harmoniously the tune together,
hmm
right? So it isn't about more important than the next because the conductor, yes, holds everyone together, but without the instrumentalist, what is the orchestra? So I think it's
right.
everybody understanding, no matter what your role is, it's part of that collective harmony. But
Mhm.
it's how do we recognize that harmony and how do we stay in tuned with it?
Right. Recognizing that value is
Yeah.
a key thing. Right now, most of the people in charge of things are people who we respect and put there because they've been successful.
Yes.
Now, if the terms of success have to be changed, you see the problem.
Right.
The values that we put people in are into those leadership positions that we hold them there are often well, those people are there because they have been successful in the system as it is in the simplest. That's me getting to where I want to be.
Right,
If those people are there because of the system the way it is, who they're not the ones to change it.
right. No.
So what you end up having, and I think this is why we have so many dystopian movies and so on, is what you
Hmm.
need is, and even Star Wars,
Yes.
you need a system that has gotten so out of tune that a huge number of people can begin to organize themselves according to alternate values
Yeah.
and create their own sustainable sustenance. Um, and eventually the power simply leaves the
Mm.
system as it was.
Yes.
It simply leaves it, it seeps out of it because
It
there,
no
there,
longer has a place. Yeah.
yeah, well, the people have gone somewhere else,
Right, exactly. So it disintegrates naturally.
and
So we've always got to look to the alternative. It's not about crying or being mad about what is there, it is what is possible.
yeah,
How do we collectively look to, we know what's wrong, how do we collectively, in our own heightened consciousness, put it right? And we can only do that when we all come together and share the vision and the possibilities, and each one
enough
of
of
us in
us.
our own gift. Yeah.
Yeah, and the question is it going to be in the back room and hiding in the basements
Right.
like the Christians did in Rome?
Hmm.
Or is it going to be, uh,
Blatantly out there.
yeah, I don't know. I mean, right, at some points you think what you want, what you need to do is so different that
Yeah,
the people who might oppose you don't recognize it as being a
exactly.
problem.
Well,
Well, a
that's
little,
that again comes to that kind of frequency. When you're up on a certain frequency, people that are on that lower frequency don't feel you. And so you want to raise your frequency, your vibration up to a level that invites those people who are at that level to come together. It's not, we're not going to change the people with the lower vibrations mind. That's up to them if they wish to climb up into that higher
the,
vibration, see, right?
yeah, unfortunately, there's an alternate argument to that is that you really have to get those people with who are not at that higher vibration started.
Yes, but
And that will,
inspiration begets invitation. The more you're inspired by what somebody else is doing, the more it invites you to
yeah,
perhaps elevate. And so, I think we can't go in and say to them, change, do this, but what we can is become the change that inspires them to want
right.
to be a part of it, because everything is free will. I could talk to you forever, but I want to talk to you about your book that may come out soon. I hope so. Right now, you've just got it in PDF, and
Yeah.
it's at Two Vast Realms, the architecture and practice as being of world and spirituality, and which you will be producing soon.
I had been trying. I mean, I've been told it's a niche product,
Hmm.
and that makes it harder to publish. It's the real goal is what it's made of is basically a single symposium that took place in one day, but because it was during the pandemic, I took advantage of people being interested in communicating that way and did something that you cannot normally do, is bring
Hmm.
together um, 10 people who are really profoundly knowledgeable um, in one discussion.
Mm.
Uh, to fly everybody together would have taken thousands and thousands of dollars. So this event took place between Canberra and Chicago in one continuous flow of two panels.
Hmm.
And it was intended, it basically wasn't done like a normal panel where you have everybody make a statement and argue for it.
Hmm.
Rather, the questions that we would be asking was put to them months before the event.
Hmm.
And I did not ask them to write anything.
Right.
They could come into it with hands relaxed, nothing to
Yes.
hold, nothing to bring. But at the end, everybody had to make a closing statement, and they spoke to the questions among each other
Hmm.
and responded in a second round. And the third round was everybody makes a closing statement. And what happens is that we made a progress toward creating a community and creating language that can discuss things
Hmm.
that cannot normally be discussed very easily because it's so difficult. What we were discussing was that the architect, which is everybody,
Hmm.
I mean, there's professional architects who build spaces,
Right.
but everybody is an architect
Yeah.
because it is us who is perceiving and making it into architecture. Only people can do that. So architecture exists only in the moment of experience, not then things that create that activity of experience very, very often we call it architecture. We'll say, oh, that's
Yeah.
architecture because we know the pyramids are architecture and we
Mm.
call it. But actually, the perception of architecture, yes, I can go to the pyramids and I'll look at it and go, I don't know why this is architecture. It's just a bunch of rocks.
Hmm.
There are people who will have that feeling, right?
Yeah.
But on the whole, we say they're architecture because most people feel it, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
So in this discussion, it was like the architect is looking into the world and into the spirit or into the
Mm.
heart or it's the human mind, not just
Hmm.
my mind and your mind, but the
Right.
human mind. We, my mind doesn't exist without everybody's mind.
Exactly. Collective. Mm.
So it's about how architects can work with these two sides and what that means, and a series of questions about that. So all of those discussions were transcribed, and then all of the words and
Yeah.
habits were removed, which was almost 25% of the bulk of it. So carefully edited with an introductory essay. And it's intended to be one of those books that you pick up and you can start reading it anywhere
Hmm.
because each one of these people, each time they answered something, it was worth reading. And it's just little pieces, right? And um, and
Well, I
so,
hope the book comes out soon
yeah,
because, it
that's
sounds
what I want.
absolutely intriguing. And
The idea was that it's a small book that you find in a little one that you just pick up and it's
mm,
not too expensive and you can just grab it. So I hope
right,
I can get that done.
soon.
Um,
Great. And when it does, we'll just add it to your show page. So, would you tell people how to find you, your social medias? You've got three different sites here,
yeah.
and you know what they are and how people can find you.
Well, I do have a presence on LinkedIn. You can find me there. I have a website which is just a bare bones linking site called Karassowitsch.ca.
Can you spell that for the people listening, please, love?
K, my name is Karassowitsch, and I
Dot
use that as
.ca.
that's my domain at .ca, not .com.
Hmm.
You'll get a hotel somewhere else if you get .com. Not me, my family, but in Europe. And so that's one place. The other LinkedIn is possible, and I do write on Substack, and I use a domain called opa.earth, and OPA stands for Office for Presencing Architecture. So what I was speaking about earlier is that when we experience architecture, we are actually creating it. In
Mm.
our awareness is a value, architecture is a value that we create, which is related to our aspiration, our heart's aspiration, and what we actually are here on the planet to do for ourselves, because that's
Hmm.
where it starts. So Office for Presencing Architecture, spelled OPA, dot earth. And that is my Substack writing. And so right now I'm writing some more abstract things, but I'm trying to become more topical. I recently wrote an article which responded to a letter to the editor and Canadian architect, where what I was speaking about earlier about how we get paid as architects really came up. And so I decided to respond to it because it's more topical on in the daily basis, in the daily um, experience, which is hard to do in architecture. But
Right.
so I'll be trying to do more of those there. And but those are the main ways. So ultimately, my business will be opa.earth. And the third thing that I have is I have a small design company here in the Oceanside, in the Mid Island area. You could say for Vancouver Island,
Hmm.
where I'm creating a low barrier, single price pre-planning service. So if somebody has a home and they want to change it, or if somebody has a business where they have more people coming in, or they want to downsize, and maybe they can still use where they're staying, or maybe
Hmm.
this part of the house can be made more fitting for me, rather than talking to a contractor who's not really a designer, not rather than talking to somebody whose business is to create permit drawings and to create construction drawings. Talk to me first and we can talk about the broader spectrum of what needs to happen. And in almost all cases, we're talking, you know, tens of thousands of dollars of savings.
Mm-hmm.
Even on a kitchen renovation where somebody wants to charge you 50,000,
Right.
perhaps if you come in with a specific idea about what needs to be done, you can actually do it for your specific needs, which is only 20,000, and save yourself doing a big project that you didn't really want.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
And so what I'm trying to do is help you to communicate with the people who are going to give you what you need.
Mm-hmm.
That
And which
company.
one, well, how do they contact you for that, love?
That one is called ENVA. I call it ENVA, which is a acronym kind of for Environments for Health and Advancement Limited. And the website is envha.ca. envha.ca. And you can write me on an email there. It's michael@env.ca. The new website is coming up in days, I hope. And there is a contact page there. There's a contact right now online, and we'll be upgrading that website pretty soon.
Excellent. And you also have a free giveaway, a free 2 hour consultation that derives from the
Yeah,
podcast. And that will go out to the first how many people that listen and reach out to you?
I think we'll give it to the first five people. I'm not into big numbers. I think five will be a lot. So the first
Right.
five people who contact me about this, we can do a 2 hour consultation, which is I basically have three services, and the first one is just a simple consultation of you bringing your documents and showing me what you need, what the
Mhm.
problem is, what the issue is. That could be about purchasing a property. It could be about whether you want to do a design, a rebuild project. And after our discussion, I write out a page that documents the points, that documents the issues, potentially solutions that we came up with or options, so that you then have something and you say, okay, this is
Yeah.
one point in my foundation of what I'm going to do. The other two products are a bigger project, which really goes into a long meeting, and then
Hmm.
there's a report. And the third one is to develop that project. So if you say, "Oh, I'm going to go for the renovation. I'm
Hmm.
not going to go for the rebuild. I'm not going to go for the addition. I want to renovate." And then we can go further into the renovation. Again, I try to do a fixed price up to, or it's based on an hourly up to a
Hmm.
maximum, which I don't change unless you change your what you
Right.
want to do, right? But I can be pretty exact on those things due to experience. I know
Excellent.
how things
Wonderful.
go.
This has been delightful, really food for thought. I always invite people to have a podcast party, listen to a podcast, take notes, and then have a conversation afterwards of what you got from it, and it just rounds it all out a lot more, seeing things from different angles. And I think this is definitely one of those shows that people need to listen to again and again, but also have a conversation about. So, thank you so much for sharing with us today, Michael,
It was
and
my pleasure.
certainly food for thought. Looking at the spirit of who we are from a different angle. And bottom line is to remember we're all part of nature. And, if we just rise up to that higher frequency, that higher level of consciousness, and realize we're all part of nature,
Hmm.
and to tap into the flow and the vibration of life, we'll all probably get on a lot better and find the solutions that we are that we're denying ourselves. So I think that's really important. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Until next time, folks, bye for now. For a free 2 hour consultation, the password is spiritual architecture. 1,000 shows ready for your listening. We are here to serve you, to help you on your journey of life, and we know that through inspiration, it begets invitation. We are supported by you, the listeners, and those that we interview. Anything that you can spare us in donation would be greatly accepted, and we do hope that you enjoy the next show.